Ladies and gentlemen, innovator, international branding expert, CEO founder of Schussler Creative and Rainforest Cafe, and best-selling author of It's a Jungle in There, Stephen Schussler.
I created Rainforest Cafe, and I went out and told everybody about my idea to try to get some feedback. For the most part, that was a huge mistake. What people said to me when I told them that I wanted to have live tropical birds adjacent to food, and I wanted to have cascading waterfalls and soothing mists, and I wanted to have animated animals, and I wanted to have all of these weird things that no one's ever thought of before. They said that it was absolutely impossible, that it couldn't be done. And they asked me to show them architectural diagrams. Steve, can you define further what you'd really like to do? So I decided to take it a little bit further. I transformed my St. Louis Park, Minnesota home into the Rainforest Cafe. Now, this is a suburban neighborhood. You have to imagine this in Minneapolis. I think I'm the only one on earth that used to shovel the snow off the grass so I'd have the green come through. I had a neon paradise sign. I had pink antifreeze in my waterfalls so they wouldn't freeze. You can't imagine what that looked like at night. The neighbors thought that I had lost my mind, literally. They hired a psychiatrist, and he would call me once a week, and he would say, Steve, the neighbors already chipped in. They already paid for it. They really think that you need psychiatric help. Would you come and just talk to me, please? Let me be worthy of the money that the neighbors chipped in. I even had an elephant that you can see in the picture there in my driveway. This was the driveway to my suburban home. One of the nice things, though, is that elephant was the inspiration for the elephants that are outside the Rainforest Cafe now. Every Rainforest Cafe in the country has an elephant that greets our guests. And that idea came from my driveway, as well as many others. I even built a tropical bed in my home that looked like came out of a rainforest. It looked like it was built out of a tree house. And I had waterfalls and rock formations. And if you've ever been to a Rainforest Cafe, I embrace them here at Disney World, I could tell you that we have lightning and thunderstorms every 22 minutes. And I had lightning and thunderstorms in my bedroom. Not many dates. Nobody wanted to be among lightning and thunderstorms and a nut that a psychiatrist would call every single week. I had 40 live tropical birds in my house, 2 tortoises, a baby baboon. By the way, nobody should have baboons. They belong in a zoo. My electric, phone, and gas were turned off every single month for 3 years. I'm not proud of that. It was a very, very hard time. I used to look in the mirror at night. Sometimes I'd cry pretty hard. And then I'd laugh at myself and realize I was probably psychotic. But I'd wake up the next day and I'd laugh and I'd be encouraged and I'd get back on my bicycle and I'd ride it again. I'd get back up and I'd keep fighting over and over and over again because I knew what I had. I knew that it would be embraced by families around the world. I knew that it was a phenomenal concept and it was worthy of what I was going through. That's the inside of a Rainforest Cafe. I can't tell you how proud we are, 17 years later, to still have the Rainforest Cafe entertaining hundreds of thousands of families. My father was watching the World Championship of Poker in Las Vegas, where he lived. This gentleman named Lyle Berman was playing for the World Championship of Poker. He had won 7 times He had won 7 gold bracelets for playing in the World Championship of Poker. And he was sitting at the table playing, and all of a sudden, the announcer said, "Ladies and gentlemen, from Minneapolis, Minnesota, Mr. Lyle Berman." Lyle got out of his seat because he had to use the restroom. So he went to the restroom, and my father seized the opportunity and crawled under these red velvet security ropes that were surrounding the World Championship of Poker. You have to imagine this in the middle of Las Vegas. There's tens of thousands of people standing, watching the World Championship of Poker, and my dad snuck under the security ropes and sat in Lyle Berman's chair. Lyle comes back from the bathroom and he says, "Sir, are you out of your mind? I've got $330,000 in chips sitting in front of you. You're sitting in my chair. I'm playing for the World Championship of Poker. There's security guards all over the place. Please get out, otherwise I'm going to have to call security." And my father said, "I'm not leaving." Lyle said, "Sir, you're crazy. You're going to be arrested." My father took out a $50 bill out of his pocket, and he handed it to Lyle, and he said, "Please, I'm begging you. My son created this Rainforest Cafe, and it's the most incredible thing you'll ever see. And you're from Minneapolis. You really need to see it." Lyle said, "You're out of your mind. I just told you I'm playing for the World Championship of Poker. Well, what is this about a Rainforest Cafe?" And with that, Lyle gave him back the $50. He gave him his business card. He said, "Call my secretary, Joan, and set up an appointment." And my father left. He picked up the phone. It's now 3 o'clock in the morning. The phone rings in my home. I answered it, of course, in my underwear. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And I said, "Hello." I was a little bit angry. I thought someone had the wrong number. My father said, "Son, grab a pen." I said, "Dad, are you in trouble? Are you in jail? Did you get hit by a car? Are you in a car accident? What's wrong?" He said, "Just grab a pen and write this name down, Lyle Berman." I wrote it down, and he said, "Do you have it? Do you know how to spell it?" I said, "Dad, I got it, Lyle Berman." He said, "Have you ever heard of him?" I said, "No, Dad, I've never heard of Lyle Berman." He said, "Well, you better get to know him because he really wants your Rainforest Cafe." Lyle was my angel investor, my mentor, founder of Grand Casinos and the World Poker Tour, pretty famous guy. And he went to my home 27 times. 27 times over 3.5 years. The first time he went to my home, he came in with a Grand Casino's coffee cup at 9 o'clock in the morning. I told his secretary that he had to come after 6 o'clock at night when it got dark, because I wanted to take advantage of the 2 gasoline generators that I had in my backyard, the 3,700 bright orange extension cords running through my home, so he could see all the specific things that I had that needed nighttime to see them. He didn't listen. He didn't care. He thought I was just a nut. And he came into my home at 9 o'clock in the morning with this coffee cup in his hand, and as he walked in the front door, I think he was greeted by the baboon. And he looked at me and he said, "Just so you know, there's not a chance that I will ever invest in this idea." He said, "So I don't want to give you any false hopes." And he went through the entire place, and he just kept shaking his head. I think he spilled his coffee 4 times. He laughed an awful lot. And he said, "Boy, are you committed?" And I said, "I sure am." He said, "You should be committed." And as he was leaving, he said to me, "Steve, would you mind if I brought my kids back next week to take a look at this?" I call that the conditional no. And I said, "Absolutely." And every day I would spend more money getting it ready. I'd put more greenery in the ceiling. I'd find a hole here or find a hole there. My attention to detail was the most important thing for me. It took 3.5 years. Week after week, he'd bring other visitors back. One day he rented a bus, and he brought his entire office to my home. You can imagine, I lived in a suburban neighborhood. Imagine seeing all these cars week after week after week, and then the bus. 27 times over 3.5 years until Lyle Berman. Finally, I walked into his office one day and I said to Lyle, I said, I've had it. I've done all kinds of things for you. I've gotten to know your family. I've gotten to know your friends. I've done everything that I possibly could. This is it. You know, I'm done. I walked into his office wearing a sign around my neck. And the sign said, Lyle made me do it. And I told him that if he didn't invest that day, that I was going to the Hennepin Avenue Bridge and I was going to jump. He said, that's it, I'm in. And I found my angel investor. But it took courage, it took change, and 3.5 years. Persistence, lots of persistence, and learning how to take no and change it into yes. I embraced hope specifically in a grand way when I was working for Southern Bell Telephone Company right here in the state of Florida, in Miami. I went to college, 2-year college at Miami-Dade at night, and I had to work full-time during the day. And I wanted to get a job that paid me enough money to sustain my life and also get through my college education. So I went to telephone training school during the day, and I went to college at night. I actually learned how to climb telephone poles in telephone climbing school. And what I learned quickly about Southern Bell Telephone Company was that most of the people that worked for the company had bag lunches. And they would take their lunches at 12 noon, so I decided to eat at 11:30 in the morning. I ate a half hour before everybody else, so that when they came down the telephone poles or out of the sewers from pulling cable, I would climb up the telephone pole and I'd plug into other people's telephone lines and interview for jobs. My major was television and radio broadcasting, and I wanted to get into television radio in a really bad way. And every guy I interviewed with, or every woman I interviewed with, said, son, you're amazing. You're aggressive, you're young, you're friendly, you've got great sales ability. You're the next guy we're gonna hire. And I would leave all pumped up, and the next day I'd climb the pole faster, or I'd pull cable faster, knowing that it wasn't gonna last that long, that I had to work for a telephone company, that I was gonna be in the broadcast industry. Well, 6 months went by, and I kept interviewing for jobs, but I was always pumped up. I was always looking forward to that next opportunity. And 6 months went by, and I didn't have a job. And one day, I just decided I was gonna put a line in the sand, and that was it. My roommate, when I told him my idea, gave me $20 in bail money. Because he said, there's not a chance you're gonna be able to pull this off. I called a crate company, and I had a barrel built big enough for me to fit in. I called 2 Miami-Dade off-duty police officers that were friends of mine. They came to my home in uniform with a paddy wagon. I paid them $100 each. In the 70s, ladies and gentlemen, that was a lot of money. And they put the money in their pocket, and they laughed. And I called a costume company, and I rented a Superman costume. That's the costume. That was the day I was stuffed in the crate. And next-door neighbor made me a salami sandwich and a Coke. So I had a salami sandwich and a Coke with my cape, and I got into the crate, and my head was in my crotch. You can't imagine what that was like. I forgot to put holes in the crate. So if you can imagine, I'm in the crate. The police officers had a 2-wheel dolly. They took me from my home, put me in the back. I had a salami sandwich and a Coke. I think in the first 5 minutes of the ride to get to Biscayne Boulevard to visit WGBS Radio and a gentleman by the name of Don Hamlin, who was the general manager. Now, I had interviewed with him before, so I realized he had a sense of humor because the pressure of radio and television broadcasting and the timetables and everything that was involved required laughter. So I wanted to find someone that had a great sense of humor. I didn't go into this cold. I had interviewed with him before. And I figured if I did something outrageous that he'd never forget, something that took courage, something that took change, that maybe I would be embraced and I'd get the job. So the Diet Coke exploded, or the Coke exploded, and the salami sandwich spoiled. I don't know how many of you have ever experienced salami in heat. We got to the radio station on Biscayne Boulevard, a couple hours from here in Orlando, and the police officers unloaded the crate, brought me into the front door. Through the secretaries, the receptionist, there's salespeople, there's weather people, there's all these people gathering around this crate because they couldn't believe that a crate was brought in by 2 police officers in uniform with guns and everything. And they explained that I was an expensive piece of furniture from Mexico and that it was being delivered to Mr. Don Hamlin. Well, of course, the way the story goes, Don Hamlin was not in. He was in a board of directors meeting in a hotel in downtown Miami. So they called and they said, "We have an emergency. Would you please get a hold of Mr. Don Hamlin?" They interrupted the board meeting. Him and all the board members came back to the office to find out what the emergency was all about. So Don Hamlin finally came with the 12 members of his board. They came in and he kicked the box, and he was using language that I will never repeat here. And he was saying, "Why would you bother me in the middle of a board meeting over some crate?" And he asked the police officers if they were nuts. You know, why get me out of my meeting? I didn't order any expensive piece of furniture from Mexico. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, they opened the crate. Thank the Lord. I came flying out like a jack-in-the-box. Pieces of the salami sandwich were going all over the place. The can of Coke hit somebody in the head. And I said, "Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Schussler. I am your new super salesman." And I threw my cape that was soaking wet back. And they threw their papers and briefcases up in the air. It was like New Year's Eve. They couldn't believe it. They said, "Son, you're the sickest person we've ever met. You're hired."